Hello, my name is Simran Gupta and this is my abstract presentation. Introduction. The problem I wanted to test was whether artificial light has any effect on mold growth. Mold grows from spores, and these spores are bound in the air and can onto food particles. Once a spore has latched onto a food particle of choice, it releases a chemical which causes the food particle to break down faster. This causes the reproduction rate of the mold spores to increase. And this is according to Axel et al.
2017 article, the reference of which will be at the end. Mold is considered bad because when a food particle reaches its shelf life, meaning the maximum length of time it can survive before it starts to break down, it decomposes. So mold is basically an indicator of when the food particle is starting to decompose. At this time, if it's in your fridge, you want to throw it out. If you decide to cut off the weird colored part and proceed to eat it, you can become very, very sick. And the reason for this is when mold grows, it's little intravenous design, I guess, for lack of a better word, just means that it's gone through the entire food particle, and just because you scrape off some of it doesn't mean it's all gone. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Now, the reason I wanted to do this experiment was because I wanted to find out why it seems like some foods are always in the fridge and yet they still end up going bad. I wondered if this had to do with some of the light fixtures in the fridge. In my case, it's always the food on the top shelf of my fridge going bad. So I came up with an experiment to go along with it. Also, light fixtures, when you open the door, it turns on, and when you close the door, it turns off. Like that's the mechanism of the light fixture. So I wanted to see whether it was the artificial light or the fact that there was no light coming in that was causing the mold growth. So my hypothesis is artificial light is better than complete darkness for mold growth. The materials that I was using for this experiment were 10 slices of 12-grain bread, 10 Ziploc bags, a total of 10 teaspoons of water, 1 teaspoon of water per Ziploc bag, a box with a lid and a surface area large enough to lay 5 of the bags down flat, 5 Amazon reading lights. I know it says 10, that's a typo. And then the location for both aspects of the experiment. So for methods, I placed 1 teaspoon of water into a sandwich bag, shook it up, and then opened it up and placed a slice of bread, 5 of which were then laid down into the box and then sealed in the box, and then the box was placed in a cupboard under the sink in the garage. There was no way for any sort of light to come in. And then for the location where I wanted to put the artificial light was on top of my fridge. Now, at that height, there are windows, and at a certain point, the windows can get light, but just because it's so high off the ground, there was no way for any artificial light to reach. And even if it did, there were enough things on top of the fridge to block any sort of natural light. Now, I had 5 Amazon reading lights. These lights have a little clip-on at the base, and so this clipped onto the zipper part of the sandwich bag and then was secured using duct tape to make sure that the reading light didn't topple over. Now, the distance between the light fixture in the fridge and the top of a loaf of bread was about 5 inches. So I set the reading light at 5 inches above the sandwich bag. And for 2 weeks, meaning 14 days, I collected and reported data at 5 p.m. every day. It was either me or someone in my family, but basically at 5 p.m. every day, data was collected and then noted down. So for the first spread, you can see how many white, gray, or black, or small, medium, and large colonies there were, and whether they combined to grow into one larger one or whether they stayed separate. You're able to tell on these little data sheets, and they're labeled bread number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and then it'll be light or dark, and then it's by days 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 14. Now, I decided to do it by day, as I mentioned previously, and then I labeled each a graph, so I knew which graph was referring to which bread. And then I described white fuzzy, because that's what I saw, black mold colonies, and then the typical gray mold colonies for bread, and then small, medium, large based on size. So bread 2, bread 3, bread 4, bread 5 for light. You can see that these had some data. Now the ones for dark, I didn't see any mold growth, so hence there was no data for the next 5 breads. So this proves my earlier hypothesis, if I were to go back, that artificial light is better than complete darkness for mold growth. And here's the reference, and that is the end of my presentation.